Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Cardinals. Zachary Silver of MLB.com is joining the show to break down the 2021 season, talking about the Oliver Marmol hiring and the Mike Shildt departure, as well as what the Cardinals will look to do in the offseason to improve their team to go for a championship in 2022. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Cardinals.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this edition of Locked On Cardinals with special guest edition. Zachary Silver of MLB.com joins us for the second time on the show. Zach, thanks for hopping on the show to talk a little Cardinal baseball today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think the last time I was on was probably spring training, right? So this is a nice encompassing thing we've got going on, and good way to start and wrap up the season.
Yeah, I think it was right around when you first started, and it was spring training because we were talking Liberatore and Gorman. I think a couple of different things of that nature, and here we are a couple months later, and a lot of things have changed for the Cardinals, especially in the last couple of days. We'll get to the new manager coming up here in a little bit, but I kind of just want to ask you a blanket statement for a question first. If you had to recap the Cardinal season in a minute, whatever it is, if you just had to give like a quick blurb, elevator pitch type summary to the Cardinal season as we get kind of right into the content, how would you summarize the season?
Yeah, I mean, it was nothing short of a roller coaster. I've been working on a lot of off-season content, and you just sort of look at the month-by-month change in the trend lines of this entire year. It goes from getting Nolan Arenado on February 1st and thinking that there's going to be a championship on the horizon and at least competing for one, and then you start the season off high, you start well, you have a few injuries that you work through, but you get to June and things just really sort of hit the haywall and really go poorly. You lose Jack Flaherty, you lose Miles Michaelis again, you lose just a lot of key members of the rotation, and then just kind of when you think it's all ready to go and just book it for 2022, you start to creep back in, and then you sort of the roller coaster hits that peak in September with that win streak, and they make the postseason, and obviously how it ends is a little deflating, but still I think it was a worthwhile season to be following. Definitely, made you feel a lot of different things, but in the end, it was still, kind of not where they wanted to be, but is at least in the direction of where they hoped to be. So I think, they don't look at this season as a failure. Obviously, some of their actions this offseason make it seem a little weird in that sense, but they still really did value what was sort of built this year. And like with you're seeing 6 Gold Glove finalists, I mean, that's a good indicator of at least the pieces are in place for what the team hopes is an even better 2022.
Yeah, well, the 6 Gold Glove finalists, and I think all 6 of them have a chance to legitimately win that award, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think that when you look at how to judge this season's success or failure, if you're judging it based on preseason expectations, it's hard for me to define it as a success because the aspirations once you got Nolan and re-signed Wainwright and Molina, which are their big offseason acquisitions or movements, was division championship. Like that was the preseason expectation. But if you're judging it based on where they were at the start of September, or even 2 weeks into September, then you judge it as a success. Do you think that? And again, we'll transition this into the manager talk. But do you just think overall as to how the season was judged? Do you judge it more as a success because of the bad June they had to overcome, or do you judge it more as a failure because of the preseason expectations weren't met?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. I mean, the success is based on just how treacherous it was. I mean, if they went through this season and comfortably won the division, or I mean, maybe lost narrowly to the Brewers for the division and then lost in the wild card the way they did, if there wasn't sort of the adversity they went through, I think that's where you sort of start to think that how they went about the season's ending was a bit of a failure. So I think when you look at it in that prism, it is a little bit of a failure. And I think there are definitely aspects of the year that could have made it so that it wasn't that treacherous of a path they had to go down. I mean, there obviously could have been moves that the front office made, more before the trade deadline in June when things were really bad. They could have, they brought in someone like Wade LeBlanc, and you saw when they brought him in, and things really got a lot steadier, and they could have just used another Wade LeBlanc, and they ultimately got more Wade LeBlancs at the deadline, John Lester and Jay Happ. So I think when you look at it from a wide prism and just kind of zooming out on the season as a whole, when you look to where they were on February 1st and where they were on October 6th, I think it is a little bit of a disappointment, at least just how it went about. But, I think you also have to take in mind just how things sort of unfold. And it is an interesting conversation. Just didn't go exactly the way they wanted, but the way that it went, it is impressive how they ended it. So, then there's a deeper argument there. It's like what they could have done to fix those problems and made it so that the end result wasn't as as deflating as it was. Could have been addressed earlier. So, it's hard to. In the Cardinals will say this, that they have championship aspirations every single year, and you talk about Oliver Marmol getting the good job. He said anything short of a failure next season, anything short of the World Series next season is a failure in his eyes. So
Yeah.
that's just the expectation this organization has, and we'll see that kind of play out a little bit more in 22.
Yeah, and I think that the offseason will be big too, because at the end of the day, J.A. Happ and John Lester, I think, did better than what a lot of people thought they were going to do, myself included. I remember I did an episode the day of the trade deadline with Corey Miller of KSTK, and we were kind of just flabbergasted, as I think most of the baseball world was at that trade, or at least the Cardinal world was. I think that this offseason will be telling, because you can make an argument there are a couple of holes to fill in this roster, and we'll get to the front office aspect of the offseason first. But we've teased it. You mentioned his name, Oliver Marmol, the 51st manager, I believe, of the St. Louis Cardinals. Before I ask you about Marmol, we got to talk about Schilt and how that ended. What was your perspective? What were you hearing? What was kind of your takeaways from how Mike Schilt's Cardinal tenure ended prematurely?
Yeah, really abruptly. I mean, there were rumblings that there was a possibility of an extension. I mean, really, it seemed like there was all indications that, like you said, or like we talked about, that the season didn't go as anyone wanted as far as the path they took, but at least the way that it went about it and rebuilding and rehashing the season out to make it to where it ended up was still very positive. So they, and even John Mozeliak, like I said to us, that when he flew back with the team after the wild card game, he wasn't expecting a change in in managerial positioning, but something happened in those two couple weeks, week and a half, 8 days, I think was the change between when the wild card ended and when Schilt got dismissed, and something happened in that time span that just seemed to not be solvable and feasible going forward. And we're not really going to know what it is until anyone, Schilt or the organization, says it. And I don't think we probably won't hear back about that for years and years, when they're kind of sitting around the campfire and sharing war stories, just because it doesn't really behoove anyone to kind of disseminate all that information. And Schilt's kind of interviewing for other jobs, so it's he wants to keep it professional and keep himself a good candidate for other jobs. But all we can sort of do is parse the language that they've sort of used in discussing the decision. And something John Mozeliak pointed to was player development and maybe usage of players, and something like that maybe wasn't quite agreeable on both sides. But that's just as far as we know, as far as the little nuggets that he's given here and there.
Do you think it was more player development? I think that analytics had something to do with it too, because that's what Marmol talked a lot about, or I felt that he talked a lot about in the press conference when he was announced, the Zoom conference, if you will, of combining quote traditional baseball values, as he and Mozeliak put it, with the analytical tools that the front office has. Do you think Schilt was reluctant to use the analytical tools, or do you think it was more the player development that they've talked about as well?
I think Schilt was actually pretty good with analytics. I mean, he definitely comes from an older school way of thinking. Defense and small ball and whitey ball and stuff like that are definitely sort of what he loved to do and what he loved to have his teams do. But I do think he did appreciate the analytics. I think he was actually an interesting blend of the old school and the new school. And there was a little bit of tension between him and Jeff Albert, the hitting coach. And Mozeliak got asked if that was part of the reason why Schilt was let go, and Mozeliak said it's not the sole reason. So he did acknowledge that there was some tensions among someone like Jeff Albert, who is a lot more of an analytics darling than Schilt is. And so I don't think analytics itself was the issue, because and Schilt throughout the season, he does acknowledge like hard hit rate, especially with Matt Carpenter in the beginning of the year when he was having a lot of trouble getting a bat on the ball, or getting a base hit. He was saying, well, he's making good contact and he's doing all the things behind the scenes that he needs to do. So I actually think Schilt was a little bit more not forward thinking. He's not at the forefront of Kevin Cash pulling his starter after 5 innings, but I think he was a good blend of the human side of it and the analytical side of it, and making a good product on the field. So I think there probably was a little bit festering here and there, but it just seemed like there was something that kind of bubbled, and the bubble burst a little bit in the last couple weeks.
A quick break in the action between Zach and myself to tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market. They have 9 incredible flavors, and here they are: coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. If you're overwhelmed by all those flavors, I got 2 options for you. Number 1, get a double chocolate. That's my favorite. Number 2, get a mixed box. You'll get 2 of each of the 9 flavors. You can't go wrong when you're ordering a Built Bar. Another reason you can't go wrong is the health benefits of these protein bars because they have 17 to 18 grams of protein, 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty, all healthy. So order today. Go to BuiltBar.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That is LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com to get 15% off your order of the best tasting protein bars, and they're healthy, and you can save money with LOCKED15, the promo code to get 15% your order. Get yourself some Built Bars today. Well, we've seen the analytics with Kevin Cash backfire once in the World Series a couple of years ago. So maybe you do need more of a blend. And I think that as we kind of look towards brighter days, hopefully, and not that Schultz's tenure was bad. I mean, I did an episode saying that there's an argument to be had where Schultz had was more successful than Mike Matheny. There is an argument there, in my opinion, that you could twist some words around and change some semantics to say that because Matheny did go to a World Series at the end of the day. But Schultz was very successful. He was manager of the year in 2019, broke the playoff drought. 2020, every manager who helped his team make the playoffs deserves a pat on the back. You throw in the 17-day layoff and the 11 doubleheaders that they played that year, that adds to it. And then this season, helping orchestrate a 17-game winning streak, pretty remarkable. But at the end of the day, there was a philosophical difference. And like you said, we're just going to have to leave it at that for the time being. But as we look to Oliver Marmol and as he tries to work this transition to the Schilt era, to the Marmol era, what do you think is going to be Marmol's biggest challenge?
I think it's just funny the way you said the Marmol era. I mean, it still hasn't really hit me, I guess, that this change has been instituted. I mean, he's so young. He's 35 years old, and he's the youngest manager in baseball right now. But I think what he's going to be kind of marked as is he knows everyone. He's been around. He like Schultz. He's been with the organization, for over a decade, and he's been up through the system. He played unlike Schultz. The one thing he does have is that he actually played some minor league baseball and some professional baseball. He knows a little bit about what the players go through as far as their regimen. And Schultz did, he obviously played baseball growing up, but there's a little bit difference as far as knowing, what the professional baseball scene sort of looks like. And something also working to Ollie's favor is that he's bilingual. He's from Florida. He has Dominican roots. Born in New Jersey. He's fluent in Spanish, obviously fluent in English. He knows he can communicate with both sides of the clubhouse, and there is not to say cliques, but there is the guys who are from the Latin American countries definitely flock to one another just because of the language barrier is real, and they have each other to rely on. They can speak to each other just how to be a big leaguer and how to go about their business, and that's something that Ollie can kind of bridge a little bit, is that he's not just been a player, but he can speak Spanish with them and he can speak English with the non-Spanish speaking players. And I think that's really something that's important in a manager these days is communication, and that's kind of what Ollie's calling card is going to be, is how good a communicator he is and how good a baseball mind he is. And he hasn't managed in the major leagues. He's been Schultz bench coach for the past 3 years, so I think he's gained some experience there. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals go with a proven, maybe more experienced bench coach to kind of serve behind him to give him a little bit more gravitas from at least the baseball managerial standpoint. So I think he's just going to be he's super great to deal with. He's always got a smile. He's always cracking some jokes here and there. I mean, Cardinals gifts has kind of made him a legend just with all the facial expressions he's made throughout the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's quickly becomes somewhat of a fan favorite.
Yeah, I agree with everything he said, and I think that he presented himself very well at the Zoom conference on his announcement with the red tie, and the jacket looked really sharp and everything of that nature. And
all the bottles of champagne behind him and everything.
Yeah, yeah, and I am excited. I think that whenever Schultz was first fired, I thought that they would have to go outside the organization because of the philosophical differences, and you wouldn't be able to live that down. But it seems that even though Marmol and Schultz were very close, I mean, Marmol, I think, was the first person Schultz thanked in his farewell statement, that they're very close, a lot of respect. I think that Marmol is different enough that it makes sense that Mozeliak went with Marmol and rather than a Stubby Clapp or Jeff Albert, who I know he was rumored to be a little bit. I think, and again, teams will try and sell their candidate, no matter who it is. But most of the time, I think you can tell if it's a genuine sell or not, or if it's just, okay, here's the manager. And I think that they're very excited. And this could just be me looking at this new shiny thing, but I am excited for the Marmol era, and I think that he has the opportunity to do well. And I want to give you a statement, and then I'll give my backup to the statement. I want to hear your thoughts on the statement.
Okay.
The Oliver Marmol hiring will help define John Mozeliak's tenure with the St. Louis Cardinals. And the reason I say that is because this is the third time that he has gotten basically to handpick his manager. He got Mike Matheny as a replacement to La Russa. That ended poorly, and then he got Mike Schilt as the interim and named him the head manager before that season was over. And then now he's let go of Schilt and got to pick Marmol. Not to say he didn't consider other options or things of that nature, but I just think when you have the opportunity to hire three managers in one tenure over the course of 10 years, I think that one of them has to be successful. And one of them has to end. And again, most of these things, as Schilt said in his farewell statement, do end in divorce, as he put it. But I think you have to have at least one that ends in with less of a bitter taste in your mouth. I want to hear your take on that thought.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue. I mean, I can't really argue with that because he had Tony La Russa when he took over as president of baseball operations, and that obviously culminated in the last World Series that Cardinals have won in 2011. And then Tony leaves after that, retires. Now he's not retired, but he retires for a little bit. And John Mozeliak has had now three chances this is his third chance to pick a successor. And Matheny didn't, like you said, didn't go very well. They had the World Series appearance, but other than that, that tenure wasn't based in flowers and sunshine. And that was what was kind of weird about Schilt, was that it did seem like a bit of a departure and a bit of a new era that seems like Cardinals are getting back to the ways of Tony and the ways of the past, where they were very dedicated to their craft and very detail oriented. And I think that's the biggest gamble of this all, is that obviously the NLCS in 19 didn't go as they wanted. Their appearances in the playoffs, the other 2 years under Schilt, didn't go the way that they wanted. But they at least were putting together the raw materials of a team that felt like it could compete. A team, you see Ron Washington, on the field with Braves players for hours before the game, just practicing, scooping a ball. And that's the kind of stuff the Cardinals have done a lot. And that's the kind of things it felt like, the Cardinals had more wins this season than the Braves had. And it feels like they could have been in that spot if they just had maybe beat the Dodgers and kind of gotten on that street. So I think that this probably is the most important sort of phase of John Mozeliak's tenure, is that this is the first time he's made a decision that he didn't have to make, because Matheny just didn't really seem tenable by the end. And this was the first time that he's really sticking his neck out there since Tony left and putting his stock into one guy, and that's Oliver Marmol. So I think your statement is probably pretty accurate, and it's going to be fascinating to see.
Yeah, Mozeliak has had a nice history in terms of signing players and trading players. For the most part, you've got your Nolan Arenado, your Paul Goldschmidt, your Marcell Ozuna, at least in terms of on-the-field product. Those three have been pretty solid that Mozeliak was key in acquiring. But I think that we're going to see Marmol transition from the bench coach to the manager's role. I think Katie Wu asked the question in the press conference of what's that learning curve going to be like, and it's going to be a learning curve for Marmol, just like it was for every other manager. One last break in the action to tell you guys about BetOnline. They are back and better than ever with a new web interface for the start of basketball season, with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for basketball and football action this season, so be sure to head over to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, Locked On. Get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Whether it's basketball, football, baseball, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts. But let's talk about the competitive teams that have been for St. Louis, specifically the 2021 team. With the tumultuous June came a great September, and we could probably spend 4 or 5 episodes talking about the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride that we went on following the Cardinals this season. But I want to hit a couple key points, and the first one I want to hit is Adam Wainwright. What can't we say about Adam Wainwright? In my opinion, he's a top 10 Cy Young Award winner. I think he's going to get votes. I think that he stepped up on and off the field, because without him, this rotation would have taken a huge hit, because you've already lost Flaherty with injury for most of the season by the time June came around. What's your take on what Adam Wainwright meant to this team? Because it in my opinion, it was enormous.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a team MVP award, I mean, Wainwright is a runaway winner. I mean, I had a stat at one point that he was handed, maybe 6 or 7 losing streaks over the course of the season, and he ended every one, meaning he started a game where the Cardinals at least lost 2 games in a row, and he won that game or led the team to win that game, and he had an ERA under 3, 2.5. Doing so, I mean, that's, you can obviously someone like Paul Goldschmidt, who is, had a slow start, but then was great, and Tyler O'Neill, who had a great season. It's hard to give that nod to other people. It's hard to give the nod to a pitcher who only, appears once every 5 days. But, I think Adam's sort of contributions in that regard were a little bit more than just what he did every 5 days. I mean, he was, when Johan Oviedo was pitching, he was Johan Oviedo's mentor, and he was just sort of the leader of the team. And, as much as Schilt and as much as the clubhouse tried to keep themselves, set forward, it was Adam was just as much as that. I mean, Schilt said when they clinched that Adam was someone who he sort of would bounce stuff off and make sure he wasn't pressing guys too hard, make sure he was still, sort of pushing the right buttons and pressing the pedal the appropriate amount. So not just from his performance on the field, which was great at 40 years old, but the fact that he was just such a rock for this team and really when they needed it was makes him sort of one of the more impressive pitching seasons I've seen in recent history.
I think he was the rock for the rotation, and I think Giovanni Gallegos, for the most part, was the rock of the bullpen because you had Alex Reyes kind of fall off in terms of production late in the year. Genesis Cabrera was flashy at times, but I think Giovanni Gallegos was to the bullpen what Adam Wainwright was to the starting rotation. And Gallegos had his struggles. He had his stretches of, looked like his stuff was flat, wasn't there. But I think moving forward, if the Cardinals want to stretch Alex Reyes out into a starter, I think Gio slides into that closer's role pretty nicely. I think that he's earned that over the course of the last 3 seasons now, and being effective out of that bullpen 2 or 3 seasons, one of the two. And I think that he's going to slide in nicely to the closer's role. Was there another piece in the bullpen that you thought outperformed Gallegos, or would you agree that he was probably the ace of the bullpen?
I mean, outperformed. No, I wouldn't say I outperformed him. I'd say someone who definitely turned some heads was Cody Whitley in those last couple of months. I mean, he was striking out almost half the batters he was facing. He finally had his feet under him after a back injury sort of derailed his season. So I'd say Cody Whitley probably was someone whose stock rose the most. But if you're going to tab a closer for spring training 22, I'd say Gio is the runaway winner right now.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Whitley. I like his delivery out of the bullpen, especially. I think that he could be a key piece in this bullpen that really needs some more stability. When you look at it, you don't know what McFarland or Garcia are going to bring, or if they come back in 2022. So, and those were 2 guys late in the year that really stepped up for St. Louis. But I think when you look at this team, it was the offense that produced a 17-game winning streak. And when you win 17 games in a row, a couple things are going to go right. So not to say that the bullpen didn't step up or the starters didn't step up, but I think, in my opinion, the catalyst for that 17-game winning streak was the offense. And when I look at the offense throughout the course of the year, some guys that impressed me, the 3 guys that impressed me most were the MV3 of the year: Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, and Tyler O'Neill. But let's start with O'Neill first. He really came into his own this season, and even last season they said, hey, left field's yours, and then it kind of wasn't because COVID kind of messed some things around and the roster was kind of in flux. And then this season, outside of his 2 stints on the injured list, really took the left field position and ran with it. And in my opinion, he was I don't think there's really too much to disagree with here. If you disagree with it, go ahead. But I think he was the best outfielder in what turned out to be a pretty dynamic starting outfield when you had Bader, Carlson, and O'Neill starting on the same day.
Yeah, I mean, consistently, there wasn't really a whole lot that was wrong in his game this year. He was great defensively. He was, the swing and miss that he sort of followed him throughout his career was really kind of gone to the wayside. He was stealing bases. He was making dazzling plays, saving games, game-ending plays. So I think he's easily the MVP of that outfield. I thought Harrison Bader had some flashes that, his July and his September were great, but his August was pretty anemic, and it was hard to sort of make up for some of that. But
yeah,
he had some flashes as well, and he wasn't just doing it against lefties; he was doing it against righties, and he really took a step forward doing that this year. And Dylan Carlson, he had a tough assignment this year. I mean, he played all 3 outfield positions. He played when Tyler was hurt. He played left when Tyler was hurt. He played center when Harrison was hurt for a while, and he played right when that was his natural position in the end of the year. But it was a tough go for him. I mean, he did very well. He was very impressive. He's going to earn some Rookie of the Year votes. But it was a lot for a Tasker rookie to do, and it seemed like he did it very admirably and did a lot of things that they couldn't have been happier about with his defense and center field especially. So I think this outfield definitely has the potential to be one of the better outfields in the NL, if not MLB, next season. Just with the sheer dynamic play of each player and what each player, the skill set that each player brings to the table. I mean, each guy does very similar things, but go about it in different ways. You got Pop and Tyler, you got, some better on base and speed with Harrison. And then you got Dylan, who just hits for contact and does basically everything you can ask him to do. So I think when you saw their winning percentage with all three of those outfielders healthy, it was something like 600 more or less,
Yeah.
I believe. And that's just a sign that says, if Harrison wasn't hurt for most of the year, then that outfield and that offense could have been clicking a lot earlier.
Yeah, I think Ben Frederickson of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch said they were like 44-26 or something outstanding like that. And I think both if Bader didn't get hurt and if Bader didn't reverse back to 2019 Bader in August. If he had a subpar August and you keep his above average September and July, then I think that helps Bader there as well. I think when you look at this outfield, I agree with you 100%. When you say this outfield has the potential to be the best outfield in the National League, if not Major League Baseball, because I talk about this a lot on my show that each one of them can impact the game at every level, and each one of them, when they're right, is a 5-tool player. Contact, power. They can run, they can field, and they can throw. Like they do it all well. And they do it all at a high level. But we're running a little long on time, so we'll switch quickly to the infield. Obviously, we can talk about Nolan, talk about Paul Goldschmidt. Who's one guy from the infield that really stuck out to you in 2021?
I'd say Tommy Edman's season was really interesting just for the trajectory it sort of took, where he started really, really hot. Then he got bumped from the leadoff spot. And then he ended up batting leadoff by the end of the year. He scores the first and only Cardinal run in the wild card game by manufacturing that run and taking second and then taking third and scampering on home on a wild pitch. So I think he showed a lot of the tools of what he sort of has teased and has, can be. It'll be interesting to see how they approach second base next season. If they think Nolan Gorman is both capable and ready, if they platoon the two of them, if Gorman's more of a DH, if the DH is around, because Tommy had a far better season as a right-handed hitter. Right. So if you like that look with him and Gorman, then you could platoon those guys easily. And Oliver Marmol has teased and has acknowledged the fact that might be a possibility that they do next season, which they've been pretty want to not do in the past. So I think Tommy's season was just interesting, just how it went about, where he started and finished really strong, and he was a doubles machine, and he was stealing bases. He was the first 30 base threat for the Cardinals since Edgar Renteria in 2003. So he sort of, he's a little bit more under the radar just because of how scrappy he is and how he's not hitting home runs and not, driving in runs because he bats at the top of the lineup like Paul and Nolan and Tyler are driving in runs. But I think he's definitely providing at least an interesting look where, it seemed like maybe he was just going to be a super utility guy. He can really, if you stick him one place, he can maybe thrive a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, Tommy Two Bags is Cardinal. I think it was Cardinals Gifts who coined that nickname on Twitter. But yeah, he was definitely an intriguing season to say the least. Absolutely. I got two more questions for you as we finish up here. When you look at the Cardinal off season, like I mentioned, there's a couple spots you can say, oh, they need some help here. If you had to pick, obviously, hopefully they make more than one move, but one signing, one trade. What position are you trying to upgrade in the free agent and or trade market in the 2021 offseason if you're the St. Louis Cardinals?
That's really the interesting thing about this team is where do you upgrade? You could use another starting pitcher. You really could. You could use a lefty in your rotation. John Lester and Jay App are two lefties, and that just gives you another look when you go against a team.
Yeah.
You need one lefty, and there's definitely some options out there. Carlos Rodon would be a very fascinating fit from the White Sox, but there's some health concerns with him, and kind of got to wait and see what his outlook looks like. But if you had to make an addition, I do think they really need a left-handed bat in this lineup. Tommy is just not as good from the left side. Dylan, is a little bit better from the right side, I believe, but you can't just go through a season, especially if a DH is in play with only two lefties, not even bona fide lefty switch hitters in your lineup. So, if you want someone like Corey Seager, that fills two needs where you upgrade your shortstop position, maybe not defensively, but you put a left-handed bat in the lineup. He's going to cost some money, and it's going to be really interesting to see if the DeWitt family is committed to that amount for a player for that long period of time, because, even Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado are both brought in via trade, and they haven't spent big on a free agent, I don't believe, since Matt Holliday and signing him after he got traded. So that'll be interesting to see if they're in the play for any of the big shortstops like Corey Seager or Carlos Correa or Trevor Story. And I think Correa and Story would be great fits. And obviously you take those guys just because of how good they are, and you don't worry about the platoon aspects of it. But, Corey Seager seems to fit both molds of what they need, a lefty and a shortstop this offseason.
Yeah, I think a shortstop is probably the route that I would go because, Paul DeYoung, I think, is just falling off the table, in my opinion. Edmundo Sosa is a very fine player, don't get me wrong, but I have questions as to whether or not he can do it for 162 at the shortstop position. I think it'd be interesting if you go a Trevor Story route, maybe be probably the cheapest shortstop on the market this season because the shortstop market is loaded. And then you go maybe a Kyle Schwarber at the DH position or something of that nature. Or if Nolan Gorman is ready, but you don't want to put him at second base, maybe Gorman's your DH to start 2022. Again, assuming that the DH is coming, which we think it is. And all of this, knock on wood, is saying that we don't have a work stoppage in December, but that's a whole nother discussion as well. Last question I'll leave you with: Game 3 of the World Series is tonight, Thursday. What have your impressions been of the first two games? When this airs, Game 3 will have already happened. What have your impressions been of the first two games?
Yeah, it's been sort of, I think I read a column earlier today where there was, it's been two good games, but now the game has been, closed. It's like, are we going to get a classic World Series, or are we going to get a classic game? So it was an interesting, the storylines, at least between the two teams, like Houston and Atlanta don't really get you going too much. It's not Boston, New York. Obviously, that wouldn't be a World Series, but,
Right.
it's not LA, New York, or something like that, or San Francisco, New York. But even at that point, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I personally, I think Dusty Baker is one of the best people in baseball, and I'd love to see him win a World Series. But at the same time, there's just so much hard feelings with Astros players and the organization, and seeing them win. The Braves also. There's some wonky stuff there. Freddie Freeman though is a great guy, and love to see someone like that win. So I don't know. I'm not one for participation trophies, but I almost wish they could both kind of go home with a ring, and just all the people in baseball I want to win at least one World Series get to win one World Series.
Well, they're both going home with a pennant at the least, so we can be satisfied with that. Zach, before I let you go, where can people find your work and find you on social media?
I'm at Zach Silver on Twitter. Not really big into the gram, but
Right
yeah,
there.
down below right here.
If you're watching on YouTube.
I usually my byline is Zachary, but I shortened it to at Zach Silver. I have a funny story about how I got at Zach Silver. I'll say that for another day. A little tease there. But,
There you go.
yeah, you can find me there.
All right, sweet. And your work's on MLB.com or Cardinals.com. Is that right?
Yep. Cardinals.com. Everything you need is right there.
All right, sounds good, Zach. There's Zachary, whatever you want to go by. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about this offseason.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.